Good evening, everyone. My name is Paisley, and I'm a house manager here at Town Hall Seattle. On behalf of Town Hall staff, Seattle Public Library, and our friends at Elliott Bay Book Company, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our presentation with Jesse Hagopian, Ava Thomas, and Wayne Au discussing Hagopian's new book, Teach Truth. As we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continued use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. The presentation will run about 75 minutes, including Q&A. When we get to the Q&A portion of the event, you may ask your question through the mic just right here, or you can use your smartphone to scan the QR code on the screen and submit your question digitally. For our virtual friends, we'll drop the link in the chat as well, and you can submit a question anytime. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, and you can help us by keeping your own question concise and in the form of a question. We have some great events coming up, including the first of our Queering Talk series, curated by Dr. Jen Self, founder of the UW Q Center, on January 29th. And on February 4th, MSNBC's Chris Hayes will be discussing his new book, The Siren's Call, encouraging us to release our grips on our phones, or as Hayes calls it, the little attention box. Town Hall is adding new events to our calendar every day, and you can always find tickets and more information on our website at townhallseattle.org. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Town Hall is also a member-driven organization, and we'd like to offer a big thank you to all the members here with us tonight. If you're not a member yet, please consider joining or donating. Your support helps keep Town Hall a place for everyone. Lastly, if you don't already have the author's book, you can purchase a copy from Elliott Bay Book Company over at the Auto Bar. Jesse Hagopian has taught in public schools for over 20 years. Hagopian serves on the Black Lives Matter at Schools Steering Committee, organizes for the Zinn Education Project, and has founded the Ethnic Studies course at Seattle's Garfield High School. He's been an editor for Rethinking Schools magazine and books such as Black Lives Matter at School, Teaching for Black Lives, and More Than a Score. Dr. Ava Thomas is a P-12 education and systems leader and beyond her local community. She's been a speaker, panelist, and thought partner for events like Zinn Education Project's Teaching for Black Lives campaign, the City of Bothel's DEI work, and the City of Kenmore's Juneteenth celebration. Wayne Au is a dean and professor at the University of Washington Bothell School of Educational Studies, and he is an editor for the social justice teaching magazine, Rethinking Schools. Au's most recent book is an Asian American Radicalization and the Politics of U.S. Education. Please join me in welcoming Wayne Au, Dr. Ava Thomas, and Jesse Hagopian.
Hello and good evening. It's super bright up here, and I can't see all of your faces, but it's okay, so bear with me. My name is Ava Thomas. I work in a preschool through 12th grade education setting. I am a younger Black woman in a senior leadership position, and I feel like the reason that I am where I am is because I didn't let outside voices bring me down or suppress me, but I tried to listen to and channel the voices of my ancestors and of my community and who I knew that I was from my own self-definitions. And I think that that body of work and that ideology is underscored in Jesse's book through truth. And so I just want to situate a little bit the state that we're in these current times and how I think Jesse's book is a testament to engaging in resistance and engaging in radical imagination and Black freedom dreaming from a Black man himself who positions himself as a community member and leader, but also as an author and activist. So in these times, we know that there are some national things happening, but that DEI is not our way to liberation, and it never has been. We have to continue to engage in justice and actively engage anti-racist thought, ideology, and action and practice. As Fred Hampton reminds us, theory without practice ain't SHIT. Jesse underscores that in his book. We also depend on the people to see and lead us, not on any institution, organization, or government entity. People have always channeled our uprisings and strength through each other and through the organization and communities that we've built, from plantations to the carceral state to education systems and classrooms. We also have the right to stay on offense. Nipsey Hussle talks about in some of his lyrics the fact that we don't have to play defense all the time. We get to stay on offense, and we get to claim who we are through affirming who we are and affirming and loving one another radically. We also have a moral obligation to teach the truth. That comes from our own internal moral compasses, but the compasses that our ancestors channeled so long ago, but that led to the ciphers of today. We must draw on the strength and knowledge of our ancestors because our ciphers are here. Our ancestors carried messages forward from the way that they braided their hair on plantations and mapped out escape routes to the ways that we've authored books and stories within our classrooms today. We will also not shrink to fear, but stand tall in our own self-affirming definitions of who we are because we have the right to do so. Sorry, my voice, I'm getting over a cold. But I think Jesse does a really brilliant job describing his ancestors and giving an ode to his ancestors at the very beginning of his book, and he titles it A Promise to My Ancestors. And he talks about the labor that they put in and that he discovered over time and is still unpacking those histories still today, but also the visions that they left and carved out the path for him to be where he is, to be able to have the knowledge and skill set and expertise to be able to author and narrate such exquisite stories of our time. The state of our schools is one that looks different depending on what state or school district you're in. I'm glad that we're situated within the Pacific Northwest and that we don't get a lot of our funding from federal dollars, but that a lot of it comes from state and local dollars. But that looks different because we know that there's class struggle and there's racism that intersects with class struggle among lots of other forms of oppression. And so the state of our schools can look different depending on what our students look like. So there's this notion of mirrors and windows and that our students deserve representation. And just like our white students need to see people and authors and people who look different than them, our students of color need to see individuals who reflect their own identities, from educators to leaders to their peers and to what they see in books. But we know that there's an attack on books right now through book banning, and that our students are continuing to organize and fight back. And so we've seen this kind of shift in youth over time from them trying to take a back seat and sit down and put their head down in their classrooms and try to seek that education elsewhere, to standing tall in who they are, knowing that they get to not just ask for change, but demand change, and to pull up seats or to even create tables that have not yet been created. They're doing that actively in our schools, and I just want to celebrate that truth. We get to set ourselves free by beginning with the truth, and Jesse talks about what truth means and what that looks like within an educational context. But we know that banned books has a history that stems from enslavement and pre-enslavement and led into the carceral system and has informed policy and practices that directly impact our students sitting in our classrooms, and that students have always been fighting back. We see the impact of systemic and institutional racism play out in our classrooms, but also in the ways that students interact with one another, and also in the ways that educators can interact with students. It's all connected. We set ourselves free through education, and one that is critical, not uncritical, and that's situated in love and care, so drawing on bell hooks and the idea of the beloved community. One that is representative and affirming, but also knowing that it's one that doesn't just stop at representation, but that it also is unapologetic in nature and is justice-driven. And lastly, we set ourselves free in action by standing on the business of our truth, by building community and organizing and mobilizing. So I just want to say thank you to Jesse for his body of work that he has mapped out, and I think that it comes at a very timely moment within our nation and in our community. So big round of applause to Jesse. I'm also pulling a high school student move and getting my phone out to read the next bio. I'm learning from our students every day. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Janelle Gary. And Janelle is from Seattle and a Garfield High School alum, adding in that she was Jesse's former student. Janelle graduated from Central Washington University with a degree in psychology and Africana and Black studies. She currently works at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle as a youth engagement coordinator, working with youth on house arrest. Her personal passions are coaching softball and empowering the youth. Her primary focus is to become a mental health professional and serve the people in her community that need representation of themselves in the mental health field. Please give Janelle a round of applause. Thank you for having me tonight.
All right. Hello, everyone. It is bright. Wow. Okay, yes. My name is Janelle Gary. Mr. Hagopian was my teacher at Garfield. It feels like way back, but not really. 2019, I think COVID messed things up for me a little bit time-wise. But I also just want to talk about a little bit of my testimony. I think a lot of times when we talk about an anti-racist lens, we really don't see the people that it affects. And I was one of those people. If it wasn't for Mr. Hagopian and being part of his ethnic studies class, I wouldn't be the person that you see right in front of you. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to share just a little bit about my story and how it relates to his book. So I was fortunate enough to be part of Mr. Hagopian's class in ethnic studies. It was the first year it was implemented at Garfield High School. So I was able to learn at an early age what it means to be influenced by someone that looks like you. Sadly, many of my peers who weren't able to have that privilege to be a part of that class weren't able to understand themselves, and they weren't able to discover things until later on with vital life lessons. The struggle for anti-racist education is essential because it involves sharing truths and untold stories while addressing systematic racism within educational institutions. Personally, receiving an education through this lens has profoundly impacted my life and shaped my aspirations for my future career. I believe I am an example of positive impact of anti-racist teachings. Not using anti-racist approach has a severe impact on students of color. When they feel excluded from the curriculum, it often reflects on them negatively. I know through my experience being in AP and honors classes, I would always dread having to go in there. And the only time I actually felt like myself is when I was in Mr. Hagopian's class. Because of this lack of representation, it can lead to disconnection and disengagement in school. Oftentimes we see our youth and we wonder why the kids of color aren't doing well in those classes, but it's really because they don't see themselves and can't identify with their teachers. And because of that, it also impacts on their self-esteem. I know for myself growing up, dealing with self-esteem as a young Black woman, it's really hard trying to navigate who you are, and being able to have those safe spaces of Mr. Hagopian, myself and other students were able to use our voices and create a group called New Generation. And basically we're able to hold an assembly within 24 hours after Charlena Lyles was killed by Seattle police. So teaching without an anti-racist approach limits also critical thinking. And I think because if we didn't have that class, my friends and I weren't going to be able to get together to actually critically think about how the shooting of a Black woman actually impacts us, not only in Seattle public schools, but also globally. You know, oftentimes living in Washington, we do have the privilege, but also we kind of have the disprivilege of, you know, sweeping things under the rug. And I think oftentimes living in such a liberal city, we just think those things still can't happen to us, when in reality that they can. So, moving on to my next thing that I would like to say about Mr. Hagopian. In 2019, we were able to learn about Colin Kaepernick and how he was able to take a knee. And because of that, I was on the softball team, and we decided to follow footsteps of the Garfield football team and the volleyball team, and we did organize and take a knee. So that is something that has been proven. Yes. That is something that has been proven and shows what it's like to understand your history and what's also going on in the world. Lastly, I just wanted to add that teaching with an anti-racist framework not only helps students gain a better understanding of race, but it also fosters a deeper understanding of themselves, regardless of their race or ethnicity, by centering around experiences like the ones that I talked about. And these experiences not only will amplify their voices, but also empowers those students to express how they feel with past, present, and issues that will happen in the future. The importance of anti-racist education is its ability to create more of an inclusive and equitable society within and outside the classroom. These principles are things that I learned and that I continue to teach the youth that I work with that are on house arrest. So I would just like to thank Mr. Hagopian again for being a light in my life and also helping me be a confident Black woman that I am today. I'm about to pull the high school move too. Okay, I will be introducing Geo Kibuin, aka Prometheus Brown, formerly known as Geologic, a Hawaii-raised, Seattle-based cultural worker, best known as the vocalist for Blues Scholars, and more recently as a co-founder of Hood Famous Bake Shop with his wife, Shira. If you guys haven't been, please go check out Hood Famous. He is currently a fill-in DJ at the KEXP, a solo artist with a beatbox music collective, and writing for his New Settler Brownouts, and for an upcoming book featuring his photography. So give a hand for Gio.
I'm wearing tinted glasses and it is still bright. Thank you for the intro. I'm here selfishly. I need to be around people. These are some confusing times. And like Ava said, playing defense. Feels like we've been playing defense our whole lives. And we know that defense wins championships. At the same time, how much longer do we gotta do this? I stepped away for a little bit from the path that I was on as a writer, as a storyteller. Actually, that's inaccurate. I stepped away from the familiar role that I had as a vocalist, as a musician, but I continued to tell the same stories through food and through community spaces. And I had a reckoning during the pandemic, as a lot of people with creative energy do, where it felt like the time is now. So this is something I wrote during the pandemic with a little bit of my thoughts over the last few months. So allow me to not introduce myself. My name is very colorful. Ride with the tribe who protect the most vulnerable. Really live the lives we've been living in these lines, plus the lives that we tried to get what the labor provided to the establishment, underwhelmed and highly intelligent, but overstimulated by the present state of things. Regardless of who president, them bombs continue to rain. You heard the old saying, puppets, strings, us for gain. But we the ones who imagine something better because we have to. There's no alternative. When you the subaltern who altering the passages and patted on the head for being so articulate and told that this language ain't your own, but still killing it. Bringing it back to life with the slang, the pidgin, they displace the indigenous, but they can't replace rhythm. And we the ones walking around with the drums in our head trying to drown out the ism. They found out what we found out when we was infants. Sundance in Mauna Kea, Haka in Dakota. The last people leave first. First people show up and I show them that I hear them and I pass the story on. And I hope y'all do the same when I'm gone. Because I'm an elder in training, staying allergic to the hype here. I am my ancestors' worst nightmare. But trying to do right and raise up their wildest dreams. So I'm back. And if you need me but can't reach me through the screen, I came to pass the torch. Now we take a walk with the youth, the students, and everybody after them who's destined to surpass us, because it takes more than one generation for some multi-generation to happen. Simple math, right? So I'm trying to listen to the youth and listen to my elders. Listen to myself, my ancestors and descendants. Listen to the ocean and the sky try to tell us all, slow down even if it feels antithetical. When everything is urgent, and urgency requires us to choose fight or flight at every moment of our lives, because there's real soldiers who defend their right to live, and these other so-called soldiers taking land and calling that self-defense. And the rest of us, we just want this all to end. The vibe been feeling off because the vibe was never meant for us to feel disconnected from each other in this war, affecting us all profoundly, even if ignored. And anger, a powerful thing. Don't let that wane. But know it can consume you like a fire uncontained. I've been on that path, tired and praying for the rain, and when it finally came, only a fraction of us remained. I seen the best minds of my generation afflicted by wounds from friendly fire, self-inflicted. Purity of ideology we measured up. They used to infiltrate us, now they watch us self-destruct. Just sharing what I witnessed, hoping maybe it'll mend. I should be pessimistic, but I still believe we'll win. And when I say we, I mean the ones who care enough to remember the past for the future yet to come. We remember the past for the future yet to come. And those who teach the truth will be the ones who get it done. Thank you. Before I go, I just want to say the path that I came up through. I didn't put it in my bio, but I also came up through, I'm a UW ethnic studies major. And that is the path that brought me to community art spaces, to open mics, that sent me on the path that eventually went through the whole music thing and then got me on this stage. And along that journey, I marched alongside Jesse before he wasn't even a teacher. I'm one of the few people that get to say that. So I just want to say thank you, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Incredible way to launch this event. The hours I spent writing this book just paid off. Appreciate you. Good evening, everybody. Let me first just say, wow, seeing all of you here tonight gathered for the first time to launch this book, Teach Truth, is an absolute joy. It's a real honor, and I want to thank Town Hall. I want to thank the Seattle Public Library that helped sponsor this, and Haymarket Books that published the book. And I want to say that this book isn't just mine. I think it belongs to the movement. It belongs to educators and students and parents and caregivers and organizers and activists and artists and truth tellers who inspire me every day with their defense of honest education and their struggles for liberation. And tonight I'm especially grateful for the folks who started this program. Thank you so much, Ava and Janelle and Gio, and we'll be inviting Wayne up after I do some readings to have further conversation. And I couldn't do any of this work without their brilliance and courage, and I've learned so much from all of them. And I also just want to thank my family, my parents, and my son Miles, who's here, and my wife Sarah, who I write in the acknowledgments. You are the harvest moon, who is the source of light in darkness with the power to move oceans. I'm profoundly grateful for your loving partnership and our intellectual engagement, without which this book would not have been possible. So thank you. I began writing this book in 2021 when the attack on anti-racist education was beginning to boil over. And as I began writing the book, within a couple of weeks, my dad, Gerald Lenoir, made a stunning discovery that changed my life forever and our family's. He found out which plantation our family had been enslaved on in Morgantown, Mississippi, and in Lawrence County, Mississippi. And it gave context to me, to the lives of my great-great-grandfather, Thomas Lenoir, and his wife, Laura Lenoir, who was born in 1844 and died the year my dad was born in 1948. Laura Lenoir birthed 15 children, including my great-grandfather, York Alonzo Lenoir, who became a teacher and a principal. And if I can get it to, there you go, that's Laura Lenoir, was enslaved there in Morgantown, Mississippi. And after discovering the location of the plantation, I knew I had to get down there and feel that land that my family had been bound to. And so we immediately bought plane tickets to go down, and then the Delta variant of COVID surged and we had to cancel our flight. And then we bought another ticket, but my dad had a stroke and we had to cancel it again. Then we were about to go again, and I got COVID, which turned into a particularly debilitating long COVID. And my brother also wanted to go, but he has a really bad fear of flying and wasn't sure if he was going to make it. But eventually, in June of 2023, we finally just couldn't wait any longer. And despite all of us in different states of not being very healthy, we just had to go. And we found the land. We got to go on the private land. There's no sign like you might have, if you've been to Germany, I hear there's signs that mark where all the concentration camps where people were murdered and horrific crimes were perpetrated. There's no sign marking. You just have to spend your life finding out where it is. And we were able to get there. And the man who owned the land allowed us on his land and showed us where the gravesite was, where our ancestors buried each other. And I count these moments among the most precious of my life. We held a ceremony for my ancestors there at the gravesite where one headstone was still there. And I read a letter to my ancestors that is the preface to my book, and I want to read that letter to you all now. I said, "Beloved ancestors, many obstacles have been placed in the way of us returning to the land where you were enslaved, abused, and forced to work to enrich the white Lenoir enslavers. The pandemic, a stroke, a fear of flying, long COVID delayed our journey here. Before that, the education system withheld any knowledge of where you came from, the cruelty you endured, or the creativity and beautiful resistance you contributed to the world. The system of white supremacy used many tactics to deceive us and prevent our family from making this pilgrimage to where you were held captive and denied manumission. Despite many obstacles and the plots to hide this place from us and deny us knowledge of this land and your existence here, we have found it. Your family has returned to claim you. We have returned to the forced enslaved labor camp that was politely referred to as the Lenoir Plantation. We have returned to the place where you no doubt spent endless hours picking cotton and tobacco with the promise of the lash if you slowed down or refused. We have returned to the site of unspeakable horrors. But we have also returned to the place where you all dared to live. A place where you all had the incredible courage to love, despite knowing that falling in love could inflict a terrible pain when your beloved was sold away or worked to death. We are here. We are at the very place where you found ways to guard your humanity from those who thought it was possible to steal. We are here where you sang together, granted forgiveness to a friend who hurt your feelings, dressed the wounds of those who were injured, and held those in need of comfort. We are here to experience a truth deeper than any that can be understood intellectually. We are here to make a promise to you, to this land, and to each other. You will not be forgotten. It doesn't matter if they pass laws to make it illegal to speak of you, to teach about you, or to learn about you, because those laws don't govern us. Only truth and love govern us. And so we will pass on the knowledge of this land and your existence here to our posterity and to all who we encounter. We send to you our deepest gratitude for gifting us the will to survive and the spirit of resistance that you passed to us through your blood and through your stories. With eternal love, Jesse, Jamana, and Gerald. After reading that letter to my ancestors, we knelt on the ground to be closer to our ancestors who lay beneath, and I really felt their love just washing over us. And this book is really my promise. It is my confirmation of the promise that I made to my ancestors that their story would not be forgotten. And I see teaching the truth about my ancestors as both an act of remembrance and an act of rebellion against a system that would rather we all forget what happened. So part one of my book is titled Disremembering, where I discuss the concepts of the violence of organized forgetting, that concept that Henry Giroux developed, and the related concept of Boaventura de Sousa Santos called epistemicide, the annihilation of ways of knowing, and also a related concept I developed in the book called educational arson, where I trace the history of book burning, school burning, and which has led to the burning of people as well. Part two of the book is titled Remembering, and it looks at the great struggle that is rising up called the Teach Truth movement. And I delve into a concept I developed in the book called the radical healing of organized remembering, which I'll try to get to before the end of the evening. So I want to read a couple selections from both parts of the book tonight. And, you know, it's incredible what's happening in the country today. I call the efforts to ban books and ban honest history truth crime laws because they criminalize educators who teach honestly about history. And astoundingly, almost half of all public school students today in the United States go to a school where their teacher is mandated to lie to them about U.S. history, about race, about gender, about sexuality. It's illegal to teach the truth to almost half of all students in the U.S., whether that's a statewide ban or a citywide ban or a district ban. And the fear of retribution for teaching the truth has created a chilling effect that's so cold that a recent study revealed that 2 out of every 3 teachers in the United States self-censor, right? They report self-censoring discussions on race, gender, identity, and sexuality in their classrooms. And the laws have become so over the top, so draconian, so absurd that really only the Onion can properly capture the moment we're in. Teacher fired for breaking state's critical race theory law after telling students she's black. The Needling also nailed it. Florida bans the letters LGBTQ from the alphabet. Yes, as absurd as this is, the reality is more absurd. In Florida, they banned the dictionary because, after all, the word sex is in there. Racism is in there. There is literally a school district that banned the dictionary. The reality is far more absurd. I want to read to you from my passage where I describe what I call truth crime. We are bearing witness to an era in which teachers who allow students to learn about racial disparities stemming from the legacy of slavery and segregation can be charged with what I call a truth crime. A truth crime is any act of honest pedagogy in a jurisdiction where truthful teaching has been outlawed. A truth crime is enforced disremembering. A truth crime law, then, is one that makes lying to children obligatory and effectively renders honest educators as truth criminals. The goal for the enforcers of truth crime, in the end, is to make committing a truth crime literally impossible, because there will be no one left who learned the honest history and therefore no one left to teach it. This requires rewriting the past so that it appears to justify the dramatic inequality that exists today, so that it impedes the ability of those who have learned the revisionist history to imagine a future without oppression. That's their goal. And I want to give you a sense of what these truth crime laws are about. So I'll read from another section here. Truth crime laws have been used to ban thousands of books in districts around the country, a great deal of them written by Black, brown, or LGBTQ authors. One school in Florida, mindful of truth crime laws and book banning efforts in the state, went so far as to send home a permission slip with students to ask for their parents' consent to participate and listen to a book written by an African American. Yes, you read that right. Students had to get permission to read a book by a Black author, and this didn't happen in 1824, in 1924, but in 2024. Laws have been written to threaten librarians with extensive jail time for distributing books that provide accurate information about gender and sexuality, and police have been interrogating school librarians about their book collections, as I explain in Chapter 2. The hysteria has gotten so bad in the last couple years that school board members have even threatened to burn books, and there's been at least one large public book burning that's occurred in the country since these truth crime laws were passed. To give you a sense of just how off the hinge the attack has gotten. And the same billionaires and politicians attacking Black education and trans students are also attacking any educator who allows their students to consider the genocide that's occurring in Gaza, and to look at the situation from the perspective of Palestinians. So I want to read to you again something that came out of Florida. In the context of Governor Ron DeSantis' Stop Woke Act, a school in Indian River County, Florida, banned the book Anne Frank's Diary, the graphic adaptation. A 2019 retelling of the diary of Anne Frank wrote the diary Anne Frank wrote while hiding out for 2 years with her family during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. In addition, DeSantis directed his independent Department of Education to ban 2 textbooks about the Holocaust. At the same time DeSantis's policies have bolstered anti-Semitism, the governor is one of the most zealous defenders of Israel's genocide of Palestinians. For example, he has called for banning Palestinian refugees from entering the United States and boasted that he personally sent weapons and ammunition to Israel from the state of Florida to aid the destruction of Gaza. Additionally, despite his outrage over cancel culture, DeSantis banned the Students for Justice in Palestine on Florida's campuses. And this aligns with the larger trend where the right suppresses educational initiatives that aim to honestly confront anti-Semitism while unequivocally endorsing Israel's attack on Palestinians. This support for Israel isn't rooted in genuine concern for the Jewish community, but rather it serves to bolster the Israeli state as a strategic ally to the United States in the oil-rich Middle East. Now, I've talked a lot about Florida, but let's be clear. Truth crime policies are not just in Florida. They're not just in the South. They're not just in red states. They're all across this country. In California, a state that's never, we've seen such wild things, it's hard to say never, but I don't think they're going to pass a statewide ban on Black history in California. And yet, 110,000 students in California go to schools where the same laws that were passed in Florida were passed in their school district, right? In Washington State, we have 3 school districts that have passed the same laws that Florida has that ban an honest telling of U.S. history. We have, in this book, I detail one educator from this area. I don't know if Crystal Vispris is with us tonight. Is Crystal here? I'm here. Hey, Crystal. Let's connect afterwards. Your story's in here. And, you know, Crystal was teaching in a school in Sammamish, Washington. And I wrote about what happened to her after she taught the truth about the January 6th attacks and that they were connected to white supremacy. And so this is in our backyard. Let's hear what happened. The following October, Crystal learned from her school administrators that a student had made a secret recording of that lesson without her consent. The video, along with complaints about her Black Lives Matter flag in the classroom, was sent to a particularly bellicose local right-wing radio host. At this point, Crystal went from lamenting the difficulty of teaching the truth about race to her students to fearing for her physical safety, emotional well-being, and career. Quote, "It hit me then that I'm going to be doxxed on social media. What do I need to tell my parents? I was scared for my life." Even though the vast majority of her students loved and supported her, Crystal decided she had to take a leave of absence and make preparations for when the radio host turned his mob of uncritical race theorists on her. This is what's happening in school districts all across the country, even in blue states. And I call them uncritical race theorists. These are the people that are trying to pass the truth crime laws, and I believe the concept of uncritical race theory is vital to understanding race, the history of race, and also the current political era we're in. I want to explain to you what I mean by uncritical. We've heard a lot about critical race theory. I want to explain what I mean by uncritical race theory. In the cacophony of today's political discourse, debates about CRT are ubiquitous. But what is not discussed and what I believe must be studied is uncritical race theory. Uncritical race theory is the term I'm developing here to define systems of belief that unquestionably subscribe to prevailing views on race that reinforce existing racial power relations. Uncritical race theory denies that racism exists at all, or it maintains that racism primarily victimizes white people, or rejects any systemic or institutional analysis in favor of an interpersonal explanation that understands racism as only sporadic or merely the product of individual bias. Uncritical race theorists position themselves as neutral, as objective, as unencumbered by ideology or a theory of race, when in fact they have a highly developed theory of race, even if they are unaware of its origins or the full dimensions of their theory. To be clear, uncritical race theorists would never refer to themselves as such because it would divulge that their opposition to CRT and every other anti-racist framework is not anchored by research or historical inquiry, but rather is the result of unsubstantiated and unmoored theories that sink under the most cursory examinations. When educators analyze race in their classroom, uncritical race theorists accuse them of politicizing the classroom, a claim that only approaches reason if you believe that teaching children that the uncritical acceptance of the current racist structures and institutions is not political. Describing people who accept status quo beliefs about race as uncritical race theorists, I believe, is important because it helps us underscore that the people opposing anti-racist education aren't actually rejecting theory about race altogether. They're merely trading one theory for another and trying to hide their theory of race behind a smokescreen. They have a highly developed theory of race, but they would prefer the underpinnings and origins of that theory go unexamined. Uncritical race theorists demand an anodyne telling of history where the United States was delivered by the stork. And they would rather not look any farther into how the country was made, lest it offend delicate sensibilities. They tell themselves that America doesn't fornicate, doesn't cuss, or brawl, or drink, or abuse, or exploit, or lie, or cheat, or steal. But as James Baldwin reminded us, people who shut their eyes to reality simply invite their own destruction. And anyone who insists on remaining in a state of innocence long after that innocence is dead turns himself into a monster. It is important to understand that uncritical race theory is used by liberals and conservatives who both often advance narratives of colorblindness or post-racialism in their meager attempt to explain how race functions in society. In this way, the term is useful for pointing out the overlap between liberal and conservative ideas. That's the disremembering, but I want us to spend a little bit of time understanding that there is an incredible movement that is surging across this country. And it can be hard to see because the mainstream media does not benefit from interviewing teachers who are fighting back, interviewing students who are organizing rallies, interviewing educators who are clandestinely teaching the truth despite the law around the country. And so in the second half of the book, I tell the stories of many that I interviewed across this country. And I believe that if all of you had had the opportunity to spend the hours I did interviewing these freedom fighters all across the country, you would have much higher spirits right now, because these are definitely tough times, and we don't see the resistance very often because they don't want us to see it, and yet there are thousands of students, parents, and educators who are combating truth crime and fighting back to make spaces for the coming rebellion that is definitely going to happen. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the Seattle Public Library that joined this struggle. They have the Books Unbanned campaign. Their Books Unbanned campaign allows teens and young adults aged 13 to 26 living anywhere in the U.S. to access the entire catalog of books and audiobooks and ebooks, an important contribution to the struggle that was first started by the Brooklyn Public Library. And this year we're organizing the 5th annual Teach Truth National Day of Action, and everybody is encouraged to join us. We've been having an incredible movement across this country. Those are some of the many cities that participated last year. And I want you to hear from some of these inspiring victories and struggles. So let's take a look at one of my favorite stories. There's a teacher named Amy Donofrio in Florida who was fired. She was the first teacher probably in the country fired with one of these truth crime laws. She taught at Robert E. Lee High School, okay? Here we have a school named after a homicidal maniac, a white supremacist who killed hundreds of thousands of people in order to impose slavery on this country, right? And you have a school that's majority black who have to go and endure that humiliation and shame of going to a school named after somebody who wanted to murder you. And this teacher had the audacity to put a flag up in a room that said Black Lives Matter to make sure her students knew that they mattered in her classroom, even if the school didn't care about them. And for that, she was fired. Publicly, the governor and the superintendent went on the airwaves, and she learned about her firing through the media. And she had to go to teacher jail for a year. They call it teacher jail. It's a little warehouse with no windows, and you go and sit there every day while you're on probation. She endured that humiliation just because she believed that black students' lives had value. But one of the most inspiring wins for the Teach Truth moment happened in Florida in June of 2024. As detailed in Chapter 3, Governor DeSantis intended to use Amy Donofrio as an example to show, as he put it, that Florida is where woke goes to die, by targeting her for the Black Lives Matter flag in her classroom. While the state attempted to revoke her teaching license, grassroots organizing and Donofrio's fighting spirit successfully helped convince a judge to allow her to continue teaching in Florida. Donofrio hopes that her experience inspires other teachers. Quote, affirming black students should never put a teacher's license at risk, she said. Quote, in Florida, 64% of public school students are of color, and I hope this can show that teachers not only will fight for our right to uphold our professional responsibilities to them, but we will win. I want to conclude by talking to you all about the need for the struggle for what I call the radical healing of organized remembering. And to me, that is the alternative to the curricular violence that so many of our BIPOC students are subjected to. I propose we care for those harmed by the violence of organized forgetting with what I will call the radical healing of organized remembering, ROAR. The radical healing of organized remembering identifies collective efforts in education, but also in social movements to uncover purposefully concealed historical lessons that are vital to recovering from historical trauma and building healthy struggles for justice. Trauma is not only inflicted by physical acts of violence, but also by the erasure and distortion of historical truths. When BIPOC youth are denied lessons about their culture and their history, it negatively impacts their self-esteem, their understanding of their own agency in the world, and their ability to envision how to help create a more just society. The Roar emphasizes the importance of reviving knowledge that has been incapacitated by epistemicidal attacks through facilitating collaborative efforts between schools, social movements, and communities to learn historical truths that have been obscured or denied. And I go on to talk about the fact that we need honest educators and truth teachers who can implement this framework of the radical healing of organized remembering. And there's a lot to say about what I mean by a truth teacher. So I will cut this short, but I want to just give you a short understanding of it. Honest educators are time travelers. They possess the ability to bend the space-time continuum and transport their students to the past. Janelle remembers my time machine in the classroom probably, right? To transport their students to the past, to examine an era before race was invented, investigate the origins of where structural racism and oppression came from, and to visit people who helped build social movements to combat these inequalities. But they don't get stuck in the past. They are also able to travel to the future to help students imagine a world where the government doesn't spend more to bomb people than to house them, and a society that doesn't lock human beings away in cages. Truth teaching isn't only an intellectual endeavor, but it's also an emotional one. Honest educators are guided by love. Commitment to truth-telling lays the groundwork for the openness and honesty that is the heartbeat of love, writes Bell Hooks. Truth teacher Cornel West has observed, quote, "Justice is what love looks like in public." I would add that truth teaching is what love looks like in the public schools. Martin Luther King Jr. centered love in the building of social movements when he imparted, quote, "Our goal is to create a beloved community," right? And that's still our goal today. So I'll end with these words from the conclusion of my book, and then we'll bring Wayne up and do some Q&A. There have been many names given to the destination of those seeking relief from racism and oppression. The poet Phyllis Wheatley, who had been enslaved and kidnapped from West Africa before gaining her freedom and becoming the first African-American author to publish a book of poetry, she called the destination deliverance. Quote, "In every human breast, God has implanted a principle which we call love of freedom. It is impatient of oppression and pants for deliverance." The great gospel soul band, the Staple Singers, simply called the destination a place in their hit single, "I'll Take You There." And they told us that in this place, no one would be smiling at us while they lied to our face. Martin Luther King called the destination the beloved community. The Black Panther Party called the destination socialism. As member Assata Shakur put it, quote, "Capitalism meant that the rich businessmen owned the wealth, while socialism meant that the people who made the wealth owned it." Stevie Wonder called the definition higher ground, and he invited us in his sonically soaring refrain to keep on going until we reach it. This higher ground is not an isthmus with only room for a few. There is room for everyone, and you're all invited there. Thank you. You want to grab my water, Wayne? Thank you. Cheers, buddy. Man up. Yeah, thank you, thank you. So appreciate you all being here. Really excited to continue dialoguing with Wayne. We're going to grab some seats here, and I'm going to catch my breath. All right. Should I be here? Yeah. We good? All right. Yay.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. Good evening, everyone. For the record, I'm not pulling a high school student. This is the official town hall iPad mini. So, Jesse, it was wonderful to get to watch you to read, think about the stuff. I found myself reflecting a lot on our own history, right? I was like, man, we've been friends almost 15 years. We've been friends, and we've organized together and written together and watched our kids grow up and, like, all this stuff. And it was just beautiful. Like, this book, I feel like, is in a way, like, the culmination of a lot of who you are, like, in a particular kind of way around the organizing and the racial politics and everything. And so I just want to thank you for the gift that this book is and just the beauty, like, just how beautiful it is, I think, both for you and for the world, and the timeliness, right? So
I wish it wasn't so timely.
yeah, right?
Honestly. I wouldn't mind selling a few less books if we didn't have a maniac getting ready to push truth crime all over the country. But
I know. We'll get to that. All right. But so just for the audience, what we're going to do is, like, I have a few questions I want to ask Jesse, and then we want to open it up to the audience, and then that's what the iPad here is for, too, as well, to take some questions from online, all right? So again, Jesse, I was just thinking about the activism and, you know, who you are as a teacher and educator. And you were talking a lot about, you talked some about, like, even here in the Puget Sound region, right, folks getting attacked and censored. And I know you've been attacked, and shoot, I mean, I went to go give a talk in California, and a school district canceled me the night before I was going to talk, right? Yep. So, like, in all these spaces, it kind of, it's not just down south. It's like, it's these spaces are here too. And so my question for you is, you have a lot of, like, really exceptional stories of resistance in the book, right? These amazing educators who have really fought back under really, really difficult conditions. But I wonder what you would say to, like, we know a lot of teachers who are anti-racist and they really want to do this work, but they are scared right now because it's tough. And so, like, what would you say to those folks to help them find the bravery, to help them see that the risk is worth it, and to help them into the kind of teaching that you call for in your book?
yeah, no, that's such a good question, Wayne, and man, I just appreciate you reflecting on the culmination of so much work we've done together that's in this book. So thank you for everything you've taught me for so many years, and it's just so great to be a comrade with you in this struggle. Yeah, the risk is real. So I don't want to, like, just glorify truth teaching and, like, these sort of honest education can get you in real trouble, right? The story is filled with teachers who have been fired for doing this work, and teachers are in different situations financially with their families and have to weigh different risks they can take or not take. But I think that the best way to follow through on your convictions and continue to teach the truth regardless of what laws are being passed or what harassment is happening is to really study the history. Connecting with the history has helped me so much. People haven't really learned about Septima Clark, and if most educators had, I think they would have a whole different view on the work that they do, right? And Septima Clark was a black woman in South Carolina who was a lifelong educator and was called by Martin Luther King the mother of the civil rights movement. And she was fired from her job in South Carolina because she refused to quit the NAACP and refused to give up her civil rights activism. She didn't only lose her job, she lost her entire pension. So after 30 years of teaching, she now had nothing, right? She gave up everything for the struggle. And then she went on, she got hired at the Highlander Center and went on to create the citizenship schools and consult with SNCC on the freedom schools. And, you know, if you have that perspective that, like, you are part of this unbroken chain of the Black freedom struggle and social justice education from that time till today, and part of this struggle, then these sacrifices are part of building to something bigger. And if you don't have that perspective, it's really hard to be part of that. And that's why they're banning this history, right? That's why so many teachers haven't learned this history, because it would empower them to continue the fight, to know that, yes, Septima Clark was fired, and she helped to lead a revolution in the South that overturned Jim Crow segregation.
Right on. Thank you. And so I take from that just like the idea that for teachers to really see themselves not as alone and not isolated, right, but really as part of these movements and have these actually strong connections across history and time, that they represent these other things, and they can take strength, right, in being part of that.
It's like the struggle has to be collective, but I want us to think about also linking arms with people in the past, right? And like that, yes, they're not there, but I mean, they give me a lot of inspiration, and we have to link arms with people right here, and that's where the radical healing of organized remembering, to me, that word organized is about the collective part. It's not just closing your door and teaching the truth in isolation, but it's about how you build networks in your school district, in your community. That's when you can stand up to these laws, because if you're by yourself, you're an easy target, right? But the African proverb, sticks in a bundle are hard to break.
Yeah, right on, right? You find you're not alone in real time is critical, right, in community. Related to that, the other question I wanted to pose to you was, you know, you and I have talked a lot about the need for teaching solidarity. Like, we're not going to get this work, like the work we got to get done, right? The massive social change that we need is not going to get done if we do it in isolation from each other, right? We have to be teaching around solidarity. And I think a lot about how the uncritical race theorists talk about this is all divisive, right? If you teach this, it's going to be divisive. And so I'd love to hear, like, could you talk about, like, the role that you see around teaching for solidarity, sort of in the context of what you talk about around teaching the truth and in your book?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Absolutely. Solidarity is the only way to win, right? We're up against an oligarchy in this country. We saw the 3 richest people in the world sitting behind Donald Trump on the inauguration day, and they have more money than any of us can imagine, and we'll never outspend them, and that's not our advantage. Our advantage is that those are 3 people. Let's go get them, y'all. They don't stand a chance if the 99% links arms. We could spit and they would drown, right? Like, we got this, but the problem is we're divided by race, gender, sexuality, nationality. They use every way they can to divide us, right? That's what all these forms of oppression are about, to divide our solidarity so we're not working together to take back the wealth that we all produce. And so education can play a huge role in cutting through racist ideas that divide us, sexist ideas that divide us, transphobic ideas that divide us. Education can help us cut through those ideas to build real solidarity. And, you know, the uncritical race theorists say that our classrooms are all about shaming white kids, right? It's doom and gloom every day in our classrooms, and we're just there shaming white kids day after day. You know what? That's not their real fear. That's what they tell you on television. But their real fear is that we're empowering white kids. See, because the white kids in my class learned about John Brown. The white kids in my class learned about the Grimke sisters in the abolitionist movement. They learned about Anne Braden in the civil rights movement. They learned about Howard Zinn, right? And they learned about anti-racist white people that want to link arms in a great uprising to transform this country. And that's what they're really scared about. That we're going to teach them about the possibility of building a real multiracial democracy in this country.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that relative to Viet Minh Nguyen's concept of expansive solidarity, where he's making an argument about Asian Americans needing to understand that Palestine is part of Asia, right? And what does that mean? How do we think about that? So, so I appreciate that. My last question for you is, the book is really about K-12 education, right? And these days I'm working in higher education as a professor and administrator and doing that work with future teachers. But so how do you see, how do you translate this, or how do you think about higher education relative to the work that you're asking for in your book?
Yeah, I mean, the truth crime laws started rolling out in 2021, in the last months of Trump's presidency. And at that point, they were focused on K-12 education. And again, there was sort of, oh, okay, well, that's happening there. I guess if it's not on us, then it's fine, and there was not enough solidarity between K-12 and higher ed. But of course, if they come for one, they're going to come for the rest, right? And now higher ed has become one of the main targets of uncritical race theorists all over the country. And it cracks me up because it really just gives lie to everything they started this attack with. They said that we were indoctrinating kids who were defenseless against our political indoctrination, right? But then what happens when you get to adults who are in college who get to choose which classes they want to take? Is it's still indoctrination when they decide they want to learn about Black history and they sign up for that class? Which is it? I mean, the hypocrisy of these people is incredible, right? They bemoan cancel culture over and over again. And without even blushing, they're the first ones to cancel any book that they disagree with, any teacher that teaches something that makes them uncomfortable. But yes, they are rolling out the attack first on DEI offices in every college campus. And as Ava pointed out, DEI is not going to liberate us all, right? It can begin conversations, and there are places where there are radical DEI leaders who use the position to do something much deeper than just investigating inequality and endlessly talking about it. But actually trying to build real multiracial struggle. But if we just let them take those DEI programs, then we know that that's not where they're going to stop, right? They're going to keep going. And so the movement is defending those, even as we know it's going to take a lot more than that. And there's incredible examples, like in Florida, of the new college where they brought in Christopher Rufo, to help oversee this incredible college in Florida, which was a big problem. And for all, everybody, when they think of truth crime laws, you think Florida or red states, right? But Christopher Rufo ran for Seattle City Council, right? And he lives in Gig Harbor. Is he here tonight? Christopher, did you make it? Yeah, good. He didn't make it? Oh. I would have loved to just invite him up here and have a little chat. But too bad. But Christopher Rufo was the one that launched the truth crime. He launched the attack on critical race theory, right? He was the one who got on Fox News and challenged Trump in 2021 to eradicate critical race theory from the country, and then he was invited to the White House the next day, and this is where we're at. And now he's sitting on the board of New College, and they fired all the innovative education teachers there, and their aim is what they did at New College to now spread throughout the country. And that's what they'll do unless we rise up, unless we fight back, unless you all join me on June 7th for Teach Truth National Day of Action. We are headed to that kind of dystopia that you shuddered at in 1984. But there's another possibility, and that depends on what decisions we all make and if we're ready to link arms and fight back.
Yeah, right on. All right, with that, I want to give some space for if there's folks in the audience who want to ask a question. And there is one here on my magical town hall iPad, but I want to create space here for folks in the room. There's a mic up here, and as the house manager said, try and focus on asking a question, not doing a whole thing. So yeah, come on up.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Right on.
Props to all that you do. A reporter or interviewer once asked Malcolm X what his alma mater was. He said books.
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you think, we, especially as Americans, put too much of a premium on education and the quality, whether we have a bachelor's or master's or PhD from Harvard or Yale or whatever? And then the other part of my question is, if you weren't in a formal school setting, would you still consider yourself an educator? Yeah.
Great questions. First off, since I don't have a PhD, definitely doesn't mean nothing. No.
What are you saying about me, Jesse?
Right, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I think that, Malcolm X didn't have a PhD, and he knew a thing or two. So we can use these letters to substitute for real knowledge, and we can also find radical professors like Wayne and study with them and learn a lot, right? So we have to figure out how to use those spaces when and where we can, but not pray to them, not bow down to that higher education system either. Mm-hmm. I've taught for 20 years I started in elementary school in Washington, D.C., and then I came back here and taught middle school before I was laid off with the Great Recession. The banks got bailed out, and I lost my job the year my son was born. And that was scary, and then I got rehired at Garfield High School, and I taught for a decade there. But since getting long COVID, I haven't been able to be back in the classroom yet. So I'm not in the classroom, but I'm working with the Zen Education Project to do training. My job is I get to meet with teachers all over the country, mostly virtually, who are in study groups around the book Teaching for Black Lives that Wayne and Diane and I co-edited. And so, it's incredible to meet with teachers in Florida where it's illegal to teach the truth, where it's a felony, a 5-year jail sentence if you get caught with the wrong book in your classroom, right? And yet they're meeting every week, reading Teaching for Black Lives and practicing what Jarvis Givens calls fugitive pedagogy.
Thank you.
Right on.
Children, 9, 10, 11 years old, want explanations of what certain phrases mean. If you had a 10-year-old child and they wanted a short explanation of critical race theory, what is it exactly? How do you put that into words?
Yeah. So I have a section in the book that explains critical race theory because what's hilarious to me about the discussion around critical race theory is that those attacking teachers for teaching critical race theory don't know what it is. And the teachers who are being attacked for teaching critical race theory never heard of it before the Republican Party started using it as a club, right? Very few, I should say. There were a couple of educators I've worked with, probably 2 or 3 maybe, in like a K-12 setting who had actually studied critical race theory. And I learned something from them. The thing is, social justice educators often, even though they weren't trained in critical race theory, which is a graduate level study of how race is embedded in the law, right? Even when the law sometimes appears to be race neutral, it's often still racist. So you have the example of the disparity of crack and cocaine, right? It didn't say, we are going to give black people, the law does not state black people get more jail time, right? They don't have to use racial language. They can just have a higher sentencing for powder cocaine than they do for crack and achieve the same goal of a racist law, right? That's one explanation of how critical race theory plays out. And social justice educators may not have been trained in critical race theory, but often there's so much overlap in ideology of people who want to get free. So, in critical race theory states that race is a social construction, that it's not a reality, a biological reality. That's what scientists have told us for a long time now. That's a core tenet of critical race theory. So there's several core tenets of critical race theory that any advancements against structural racism lead to a backlash. We're seeing that with the 2020 uprising, leading to this backlash. And I invite you to read more about it and bring it to your community.
Well, bringing legality and the law mixed in with all of this is what really scares people because they don't even know what the laws are. So if you match up those people with people who are aware of what's going on, there can be a real struggle. But if we educate kids, that struggle won't be nearly as bad as it might be.
Agreed.
No doubt.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's another one up there. I got a couple here on my screen too. So, but go ahead and we'll.
Hi, I'm going to break the rule.
Hey,
I'm not
it's
gonna
Chris.
ask a question. I'm going to say my name's Chris Pozaricki. I've taught many years and now retired. And I just want to thank the day that I met Jesse and his family. And I can't talk about how much I've learned, but I don't think I try to do what I learned from not just you, but that whole community. I just want to say thank you.
Oh, Chris, it's so good to see you.
I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad you wrote this book.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what you think of it.
I love you.
Love you too, Chris. Thank you so much. Chris taught at the greatest preschool in the world, Central Branch Preschool, and is my kid's beloved educator. Give it up for Chris and all the awesome preschool educators.
We take a couple from the screen maybe here. Do you want to answer a question about the election?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's go there.
So okay, we're gonna go there. So someone posted sort of a two-parter, but it's like, how do you feel about white liberals blaming and shaming uncommitted voters for Kamala Harris losing the election? And their follow-up is, how do you it depends on how much trouble you want to get, and then who do you hold accountable for the election loss? So yeah. Want to do election?
Let's go there.
For you.
Let's go there. Yeah, I mean, when you run a campaign on, you say you stand for justice, and then you're sending billions of dollars to go bomb schools and hospitals, and then you want to go blame uncommitted voters who were like, I'm against bombing schools and hospitals. No, That's whack. That's just, I mean, you can do that when you get funding from billionaires. You can do that kind of thing, but it's laughable. It's a political strategy to lose, right? In fact, a study just came out that the largest percentage of people who changed their vote and said they weren't going to vote for Kamala were folks who were concerned about Gaza, right? And it would have been easy to get those votes. You just had to stop bombing schools, and you would have won the election, right? But they weren't willing to do that because U.S. imperialism is what they pray to, what they bow down to. And we have to change that. We have to build a different political movement in this country that refuses to choose between one genocidal maniac and the other.
Nice. All right, here, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Hagopian. In your
I'll take it.
yeah.
Save me the trouble of going to school for the PhD. I appreciate that.
You're inspiration to many people
Thank
I've
you,
met
man.
here. But I grew up in Brooklyn, and I see a lot of the philosophies that you espouse to in the teachers I grew up learning from. So I wanted to ask, as an ally, someone who doesn't have any children or doesn't work in education, how can we stand with the movement to fight against untruth? There's a movement towards changing historical markers that celebrate the genocide of indigenous people on this land, and also the Confederate soldiers memorializing their celebrating them for the impact they had on this country. How can we also lay our life on the line, just like teachers do, by being an ally against the fight towards untruth? And how can, as a community, the philosophies you espoused in your book be tools for anyone, no matter what line of work or what place they find themselves in society?
Yeah, thank you for that. So as you came in at the front table, there was a postcard that said, what was it? Organize, vote, and teach. Yeah, there's one. On that, so if you get that postcard, you can scan the QR code, and it'll take you to the Zen Education Project's Teach Truth page, and there's so many different ways to get involved in this struggle. You don't have to be an educator or a student or a parent or a caregiver. We need everybody, because everyone has a stake in what our students learn, right? When students have the history of the civil rights movement erased, it's a lot easier to get rid of the Voting Rights Act today when nobody knows how it was fought for or what it's about, right? All of the freedoms that people have fought for are so much easier to take away if we don't understand our history. And so we all have a stake in fighting for youth understanding history. And you can help testify at school board meetings. You can support school board candidates that are running and fighting for ethnic studies programs. We have the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action that's coming up the first week of February. That started right here in Seattle in 2016 when a white supremacist made a bomb threat at John Muir Elementary School, Wayne Au's son's elementary school. While his son was there, they made a bomb threat at that school, and instead of just giving up to despair, the educators fought back, and 3,000 educators in this city went to school in solidarity with John Muir, wearing a shirt that said, "Black Lives Matter, we stand together." And ever since then, every year, the first week of February, we have Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action. So this year, we're going to have the Young, Gifted, and Black Student Talent Showcase that I invite you all to go to. You should check it out. It's going to be at Franklin High School on that Thursday. I forget what the date is, but that Thursday of the first week of February at Franklin High School at 7 p.m., and you're going to see some incredible young people who understand the change that needs to be made in this society and who are organizing, using their voice, singing, dancing, showing films to help us all get free. There's so many ways to get involved. Join us on June 7th for the National Teach Truth Day of Action and help us build this movement.
Yeah, that's the thing I always tell folks is like, the first thing is just show up. Show up, give your labor, give your support, and help people do the work they want to get done, right? So that's the first step always.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, come on.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
My name's Kaylia Baldwin. I met Jesse through some socialist organizing. And what really stood out to me about how you move and how you do your movement work and your organizing is your clear care about the people around you. You can see that by all these people who clearly care about you and who you have held friendship, community, relationship with. Can you talk about how giving examples of how you continue to do that as we approach rebellion and how you want to see others embodying that beloved community as we get towards a revolution?
Wow. Thank you. So good to see you. Great. Always good to organize with you. Great. Thanks for being here. And that's such an important question, and it's one that I didn't start thinking about till way too late. And it's never too late. Now that's a core principle that I consciously think about. But in so many different political organizations and socialist groups that I work with throughout the years, the idea of how we care for each other wasn't really the main thing that we discussed. And yet, without learning how to build a community and build strong relationships, those organizations fall apart, right? And they can only last for so long. And so the work does have to integrate yes, we're fighting against the 1%, and we're fighting against white supremacy and systemic racism and transphobia and all these forms of oppression. And we have to figure out, as we're fighting these systems, how we lift each other up and support each other. And I don't know. I mean, there's beginning to be more books and important works written about how to do that well. We all need to start. We should read those and work on it and continue theorizing about how we build strong relationships where we are caring for each other and where we can have disagreements without canceling each other, where we can have real political debates that can be fierce about the way forward, because there's so much on the line. Yeah, we're going to get passionate about it. But saving our vitriol, saving all that, let's save that for Elon Musk. You know what I mean? Let's save that for people who are hailing Hitler and destroying the climate, and use care and love for each other to build this movement to fight against them.
Hi. I was wondering, as an educator, how would you recommend when students want or need to have these tough discussions in the classroom, especially when students tend to not all have the same opinions? How would you make that space safe for everyone?
Yeah. We were just talking about this, but when you are able to build a safe space in a classroom, if anybody has been in a classroom where you felt seen, where you felt empowered, and you felt safe to speak your truth, it's the most magical situation I've ever been in. It is just electricity, where people from all different kinds of backgrounds know that, maybe they don't have it all figured out and they could make a mistake and share something and they'll be okay. And to build that, it takes time. You have to earn it. There are some teachers that just want, like, students show up in the classroom and they'll be like, I'm in charge, and so you should listen to me, and here's what I'm teaching, and listen and take notes. And they'll never experience that magic because it takes time to really build trust and to earn that trust over time by being there for them, by making sure that every student in your class, their background is affirmed, that they get to learn something about their culture and they see themselves as part of the community. And if you get there, magical transformations are possible. I remember a white student that was in my first ethnic studies class at Garfield High School, and he was an AP student, and so he was never used to being in a class with black students. And this was one of the first integrated classes that I'd ever had, because usually my AP classes are all white and my general ed classes are the kids of color, and they never mixed. And in this class, it was integrated. And this one of the first assignments we did were poems about our intersectional identities. And they created these incredible poems after learning about intersectionality that spoke to who they were as people and shared them. And this white student said, he checked off all the boxes so that he could pass the assignment, but he was like, his poem was like, I'm white, but that doesn't matter. I'm a man, but that doesn't matter, right? And so he showed that he understood the concept of intersectionality while rejecting it, right? And then after a couple months of study where I went, we took my famous time machine back to the 1600s and learned where race was created and how it was created and how it was used to divide laboring people from Africa and from Europe, and to give European laborers a little bit of privilege so that they saw black enslaved labor as their enemy rather than those that owned the plantation, right? And a light bulb went off in his head, and he realized that he wasn't part of the 1%, and that, in fact, his life would probably be better if he joined struggles against racism, and that his classmates' lives would be better too. And it was amazing to hear his next poem, where he started off apologizing to the class, right? That he hadn't taken the time to learn before he rejected what people said, right? The reason why he was able to have that growth was because I didn't come down on him and say, you're canceled, right? You don't get it. You'll never get it. You're white. It was like, yeah, you have a lot to learn, and let's go and learn it. And there is incredible things that can happen when we create spaces for people to learn.
I want to be mindful of time. I'll check with the house. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, yeah, I'm getting told we need to wrap it up. So apologies to the two folks standing there for questions. I think I want to make sure we're respecting folks' labor and space and expectations here. But again, please give another round of applause for Jesse. Thank you so much. Appreciate you so much.
So good to see so many friends here. Thank you all so much for coming. I couldn't imagine a better way to launch this book into the world. Y'all touched my heart tonight. Have a great evening.